Week 1 was wild.
Hopkins, the veteran still going, inside the 10, touchdown! Downfield, lost the ball as he...
But hidden within that chaos, hidden within every play is a bargain, a trade-off, a relationship with risk.
What a fearless, maybe the guttiest call, but you've got to have the courage to call it. This is aggressive.
Coaches, quarterbacks, and coordinators always in a constant dance with risk, but we know that they don't always make the best decisions.
Watch out, picked off.
Sometimes even when they know the parameters, like the Ravens' 4th down decision against the Bills.
I felt like it gave us the best chance to win the game.
Or maybe in a completely different instance, like the Seahawks game. They maybe hedge against a quarterback miscalculation. They protect that quarterback. They get away from what might be the best play in football, the under center play action. This episode will be a deep dive into some of those numbers and philosophy. For example, how effective is play action? Do you need to establish the run in order to build a quality passing attack or play action? What do the advanced numbers say about the Week 1 quarterback performances, like Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold, Caleb Williams, Jared Goff, Cam Ward, and others?
Cut that thing loose, fastball.
I sat down with Sam Bruchhaus, who is a senior data scientist with Sumer Sports, a data analytics and consulting firm that works with numerous NFL and college teams. I find Sumer's work fascinating. A lot of the correlation numbers that I pulled for my entanglement video came by working in tandem with Sumer, working with people like Sam. So if you enjoyed that video, you'll definitely enjoy this discussion. And now, my conversation with Sam Bruchhaus. Sam, I have something burning that I need to talk about. I want to talk about risk. And I want to ask you first, how would you define risk?
I think risk begins in the National Football League with play calling and understanding distribution. When it comes down to what the players are doing on any given play and what that means for the outcome, there's very few plays to take advantage of in the National Football League and in football more generally. So just when you look at outcomes of plays, there is risk based on the decisions you make, run or pass, punt or go for it. And then moreover, the biggest risk as a former player is injury. Availability is the best ability in football. And so there's so many different types of risk that I'm really excited to talk to you about it today.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it too, because risk is paradoxical. It is elusive. It is deceptive, because not taking a risk is still a risk. You cannot avoid risk. It's very odd because you think you're not taking a risk, but that in itself, in almost every situation, is still a risk. And football is a great example of this. One game is emblematic of it in Week 1. That is Seattle versus San Francisco. Even if you're not a fan of these two teams, there is so much that you can pull from this game, and we're going to go through that. Did you have a chance to watch this game? It's one of the only ones I watched in full on Sunday. Did you have a chance to go watch this game?
Yeah, I did watch this game, and it was something fascinating that I wanted to check out, because typically when we walk into Week 1, we are uncertain of a lot, but we have expectations. And in some games, you don't know what a certain pairing will look like. But here was my expectation for this game. Clint Kubiak, when he's been an offensive coordinator, has run at a rate that is extremely high, especially in scenarios where most people would end up passing. There's a metric called pass rate over expected, which uses the time, the place on the field, and several other metrics to figure out how much a team generally will pass. Clint Kubiak likes to run in those situations. The Seahawks last year, as compared to what they're doing last year, were one of the highest pass rate over expected teams. So I was really interested to see what it looked like, because they clearly made a preseason decision that they wanted to run the ball a substantial amount more.
Yeah, I mean, basically the exact opposite, right?
100% the exact opposite.
Yeah, and for anybody that didn't watch, quick spark notes here. We have a banged up San Francisco. We have a calf injury with McCaffrey. We have Purdy, who's now on the injury report. He's hurt. Williams is in and out of the med tent. Kicking game is abysmal in San Francisco. Jake Moody misses a chip shot. They block another one. So a lot of really challenging pieces there for San Francisco. In many ways, it feels like this is a game that Seattle should be running away with. They basically gave them 4 instances where San Francisco gives Seattle the ball, whether that's just 2 really bad decisions by Purdy or 2 really bad kicking displays. One of them blocked, maybe just not the best blocking on that play, but the other one, Moody, just misses a cheap shot. So we know that Seattle, as you mentioned, under Kubiak, is probably going to run a little bit more. They end up running 26 times, but not for a lot of yards. The running backs averaged a paltry 3 yards a carry. So what did they not do? Well, they didn't really pass. Importantly, though, they didn't run play action that much. I texted you about this, and I think you actually went back and looked into it. I'm curious what you found. How many times did they run play action?
They ran it twice. So, I mean, it like calls up a bunch of questions because we hear establish the run. And that's clearly the plan with the Seahawks this year. But what are you establishing the run for, Michael?
Yeah, because I mean, like, well, what's the average on play action for a game? Like 7 or 8, right?
Yeah, like if you're looking at all plays, including run plays, teams like the Los Angeles Rams are running play action like 20-30% of the time here. Like the Kevin O'Connell, Sean McVays of the world really getting their money's worth on play action. We only saw it 2 times despite running the ball quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think it starts to beg the question, do you need to establish the run in order to have an effective play action? Do you need a running game in order to sell the play action? Right. And I looked into this. I've been drawn into this, and I reached out to a few sources, and I was able to pull together an old training tape. And I want to play that for you now. This is an old post-game press conference training tape from the NFL that I found.
So to me, it's stick to the run even when it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's what I'd always say, right? I mean, we always want to build ourselves to run the football.
You know, obviously you got to run the ball well in this league if you want to win, and so we're going to have to run the ball well when we run it.
We all know we need to run the ball more. I mean, everybody knows that.
On the final play, you got to run the ball again. Like I mean, I wish I had Marshawn up here. Like 1 yard, you need 1 yard. Run the ball. Run the ball.
Run the dang ball.
And we both know that we got to establish the run more.
You know, we want to be able to run the football, take some pressure off.
Help out, so because when you run the football too, it creates explosive plays with the play action game.
Run the ball! God dang it, run the dang ball!
Moving, isn't it? And now I'd like to read you a passage from Vince 11:22. This is Vince 11:22 on the run game, okay? The run play is not a play. It is creation itself. No action is more fundamental, more primal than running. I'm going to pause there. Sam, did you run or did you pass first?
I definitely ran first.
We all ran first. We all ran. It is the tip of the spear. The run summons order from chaos. Let me flip the page here. Without running, the pass is nothing but a fragile orphan. The run drags opposing linebackers into the mud and opens heaven's gates to the play action. Isn't that right, Sam?
Probably not.
Okay.
Probably not.
Okay. In what way then? Because this is what you're saying is going against a lot of biblical pieces here.
So when we really start to look at the data, the amount of rushes prior to a play action and the success rate of those rushes prior to a play action really don't matter all that much. And so I mentioned people like Sean McVay and Kevin O'Connell, who are thought to be 2 of the better play callers, perhaps of all time. In the case of Sean McVay, definitely in the National Football League right now. And they run play action at a very high rate, regardless of how good their offensive line is, regardless how good their quarterback is. They run play action because they think it does very well. And the data bears this out to a certain degree. Compared to the other subset of plays, non-play action plays, which includes runs, we typically see play action do substantially better in the terms of expected points added, which puts yards in context. So it lets you know really what happened on a play. It typically performs substantially better. And as a result, there's a slight positive. Again, I know you've dealt with correlations very heavily, especially in football on your channel, Michael, but there's a slight positive correlation between the usage of play action and the expected points added per play for a team. So if you just run play action, it's confusing for the defense. And as a result, often leads to a lot of success.
Yeah. I mean, you played linebacker, right?
Right. And it is nightmarish to try to figure out what's going on.
Just having any misdirection somewhat in the backfield. I mean, even at the high school, I played at the high school level. I was safety, and you have some misdirection. There's some legitimate play action there. You can't help but pause, both mentally and physically, in that moment. I mean, it makes sense. And EPA per play, here's some stats. So on non-play action, 0.023. On play action plays, 0.14. So that's a difference of 0.126. That is a sizable difference. Of course, it's not that straightforward. There's more to it, right?
Well, I think there's a lot of risk associated with the play action that we can't necessarily figure out, which is the quarterback is turning his back to the defense, obviously. And I think a lot of coaches fear that. I mean, one of the best examples of a premier trade in the National Football League was when the Rams traded Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford. And the fear was they were going to run a lot of play action. Jared Goff was turning his back to the offense, and he wasn't doing very good. And despite that, the offense was still pretty good, but they didn't think it could take him to the next level. And moreover, you look at a guy like Aaron Rodgers or some of these aging quarterbacks, and I think they just fear getting hit. Right now, the Steelers have a very high rate in week 1 of running play action under center. They also have a very high sack rate. Now, that calls up all kind of entanglement questions, but I think there's risks that don't necessarily bear it out in the data that people have with regards to the health of the quarterback in particular.
Yeah, and I know we got some case studies on that, but it's a massive swing nonetheless. And when you look at a game that I just felt watching that Seahawks game, which is why I asked you to look, hey, how many times they run play action? I was waiting for it every series, first or second down. Like, when are they just going to take a shot here, or at least do anything besides run on first or second down? And they didn't do it. Of course, again, there has to be a down and distance where it's up in the air. Hey, are they going to run? Are they going to pass? It can't be 3rd and 15, and you're just going to have all this wasted motion now for the offense running a play action, right? You have to be mindful of that. But again, it just seems like a lot of teams are leaving a fair amount on the table here by not running play action more.
Definitely. And I looked deeply into those moments that you were talking about. Places where an expected pass measurement were between 40 and 60%. So we're bouncing right around 50%. The defense probably doesn't know what's going on. And historically, we don't really know if a run under pass is going to be had. And yet we still see a much better median for play action as compared to other plays. So in those core moments, it's very key to be able to kind of trick the defense. And that's why we see some of these excellent offense coordinators use play action so much. It's very interesting, and I'm going to be really tuned into this as the season continues to see if this changes for Clint Kubiak, because that's really the only thing about this offense that is not similar to what the Vikings were doing last year. We're running the ball regardless quite a bit, but Sam Darnold saw a lot of success on play action last year with an offense coordinator who runs play action a lot. If you're just dropping that out, you're dropping those two differences between when you do run play action and when you don't. You're kind of not playing those two distributions. You're locking yourself into one. And I think that's really volatile, especially with a quarterback who has bounced around like Sam Darnold.
Yeah, where did Kubiak rank as far as play action rate with the Saints?
Yeah, so the Vikings last year with Sam Darnold were 6th. The Saints were 18th in play action utilization rate. So this isn't actually a change really from Clint Kubiak. Mike McDonald knew what he was getting when he hired Kubiak with regards to play action.
Yeah. And I mean, so virtually every quarterback, just about every quarterback, looking into this with just NFL fast data, was significantly better with play action. Some of the biggest bumps, Will Levis, only 12 games, but passer rating was up 41.7. So he had a passer rating that was 41.7 points higher with play action versus non-play action. Stafford, 37.6. Sam Darnold was 3rd. So this is a guy that really benefited from play action, and the Seahawks just, for whatever reason, did not run it in this game. I feel like I'm in Lord of the Rings. You know when they say Sam, Sam. I keep saying Sam, but why do you think this Sam saw such a difference in this first game here? Like, why were they not dialing it up? I mean, it just feels like that classic, maybe a little bit overly conservative. I'm going to use the word risk again, misunderstanding of risk.
I was struggling to figure this out as well. And so I went through a couple of questions that I thought might be able to answer it. First is, I said, how much were they going to run? We've kind of already covered that. We know Clint Kubiak is going to run the ball a lot, even when it's not expected. So we nailed that. They're going to run it a lot. Was the run, quote, established? Not really. They're currently 19th out of 32 teams in expected points added per rush, around a 40th percentile game over the entire sample of games we have. Run really wasn't established to the level that I think they wanted it to. So were they trying to set up the pass? No. But this brought up a very interesting case, who I asked my friend Sean Syed of the Stats and Scheme newsletter what he thought and why he thought this was. And you brought up some linebackers. He thought maybe he didn't think that they had a good matchup, because I went and looked at some research that the other member of the Stats and Scheme newsletter did. And Fred Warner, the linebacker from the San Francisco 49ers, in terms of bite distance under expected, so a guy getting tricked and getting into the mush and the mash of a play action, he was, year after year in the sample they looked at, one of the lowest bite distance under expected people, meaning that he doesn't bite a lot. But then how does that, the Rams every year go up against Fred Warner, and they're still running play action
all the time.
And they're still trying to evaluate that. So to try to explain, I think perhaps they thought they didn't have a great matchup, turning their back to Nick Bosa, who really wrecked the Seahawks last year when they had Geno Smith. That game was ridiculous. They pressured him virtually every play. And then I also think that they didn't think they had a good matchup with Fred Warner. But I think there's a fundamental spectrum here in which play action is so effective that even with those bad matchups, it was still slightly better in my head. Perhaps that wasn't the view of Clint Kubiak and Mike McDonald, but that was kind of what I was trying to figure out while I was explaining it.
I hesitate to give Seahawks fans who are upset a nickname here, but conservative Clint really seemed to have fell into this risk aversion trap that I think a lot of new coaches, new coordinators fall into. He's got a new quarterback and a new system, and he maybe doesn't want to push him or put him in tough situations that much. San Francisco is doing everything they can to just give Seattle the game. They're turning it over. They're having problems with the kicking department. So, hey, let's just make sure we don't screw this up, because if we maybe put Sam Darnold in a tough spot and he gets blindsided and he fumbles, that maybe doesn't look good for me. People are going to say, why are they passing right there? But some more stats here on, do you need to set up the run in order to establish this play action, in order to really give the play action legs, if you will. I looked into this a little bit further with NFL Fast data again. Rush EPA per play only explained about 3% of the variance in play action passer rating. So it was not statistically significant. So basically, having an effective rushing attack did not affect the passer rating of quarterbacks. It didn't help a quarterback be better with a play action play. And so, again, you're left kind of wondering there, are they falling into this risk aversion trap game one? And you especially, I think, are wondering that as they kick a field goal with about 4th and a yard, Mike McDonald has since come out. I don't know if you saw this, but he has since come out and said that the model, their internal model, told them to go for it. He decided to kick the field goal. So it wasn't Kubiak in that case. But that begs the question of, okay, why do you have an internal model? Like ideally you have an internal model so you can make these decisions with less than 10 seconds and you don't have to sit there and say, how does my gut feel right now? Because that's really freaking hard to do.
Yeah, it's really hard to do. And also, I've been on the headset before. I was, a walk-on in my days playing. So in the early days, like I was on the headset signaling stuff in. you have an idea on first down at the beginning of the drive of what the numbers say. So you have an ops guy or a GA or an analyst saying, okay, the drive started wherever it started. If we get to the 42 with this much time left, we're probably it's going to be a go. So this is something that you're thinking about the entire drive. And you trust the model to a certain degree, right? Unless there is something fundamentally that is not captured by the model that you know about, like your kicker being injured and you having to play a cornerback at kicker or something like that. Typically, it's going to bring in a lot of important data about timing, what has happened in the past, the strength of the team, the spread. There's all kinds of stuff that if we ask Mike McDonald to make his own internal model, which I'm sure that they did, he could go tick by tick and figure out. So it is interesting, and I'd really want to ask questions because Mike McDonald's a really, really smart head coach. He has basically invented a new way to play defense in the way that he teaches defense. He has implemented a lot of analytics since he's been in Seattle. And moreover, you look at their draft class, they implemented a lot of analytics in the way that they wanted to approach that as well. So it is very fascinating. I had not heard that quote yet, that he did go against the model, given that I'm sure a lot of the things he wanted to consider were also there.
Yeah. The intelligence piece is an interesting one. I dealt with a lot of people in the financial world that had a lot of money that were very intelligent that still struggled with these types of things. It's the Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
Yep.
When you're in that moment, he does seem like a very cool, confident, doesn't really seem to get rattled or too emotional. In some ways, the antithesis of Pete Carroll as far as the way that he carries himself on the sideline. And I'm not saying that's better or worse, but he doesn't really strike me as a super emotional guy. And you would think someone in that circumstance is going to say, maybe more likely than not, model. But he decided to go the other route. And of course, we have hindsight now, but it gets back to this misunderstanding of risk. There is a risk to everything. And I just have to wonder in that scenario, we'll talk about another fourth down decision here in a second. In that scenario, there's something internally, whether he knows it or not, that says, okay, if we go for it here and we don't get it, people are going to be a lot more mad than if we kick the field goal and they come back and they beat us. It's less on the coach. It's maybe more Reek Woolen has a horrible final drive, makes a horrible read on a few balls. It's his fault. It's maybe Kubiak's fault early in the game. So you just have to wonder in those scenarios, it takes courage to go against that conventional decision and say, okay, my model's saying I should go for it here, even though probably most of the fans here are probably thinking you should kick the field goal. You just wonder if that sneaks into the group chat, if you will.
I think that there is a mentality in football in particular, especially a sport that has so much variance and so much bodily risk to everyone involved, to just live to fight another day. And we see that all the time when it comes to team building. We see it all the time when it comes to decision-making in the game. And I think that the best way to live to fight another day is to try to optimize win probability. And I think because decisions are so atomic in football, you think about bad decisions in basketball and you think of J.R. Smith, like grabbing the ball and running around. Well, like that was in the heat of the moment. This was considered. The play was stopped. The announcers talked about it for 5 minutes. They talked about it for 5 minutes after. The play clock was running down from 40. Because it's so atomic, it causes almost a different thought process, which is, what will this look at the end of the game rather than what it looks at right now? And ideally, models like win probability models and win probability added are considering what it will look like at the end of the game. So I think that's why two things are really important. Number one is obviously investing a lot in analytics and intelligence and understanding what has happened in the past. And number two, just building up a process. That's why I really love Dan Campbell, and I'm a little biased here because my head coach in college was very aggressive as well. We had the book following him at all times. But when you build up a process and a culture that says, we're just going to be aggressive, we're going to go for it, we're staying on the field, then people believe in that. And I think sometimes if you try to be too measured, it can kind of cause a little bit of friction. And I think that's kind of what we saw here.
Yeah, it's very possible. And everybody hates fourth down bots, but we're going to talk about another fourth down bot here. We're going to talk about Ben Baldwin's fourth down bot, which I love. Ben Baldwin, friend of mine. He's helped out in the past with the channel. I've mentioned his name before. He's got this bot that allows the public to just run these scenarios. And there was a fourth down decision in that Ravens game that has been heavily scrutinized. Fourth and about 2 from the 39. This was from the Ravens' own 39. The ESPN win probability was about the same as Ben Baldwin's, about 8, +8, which is like saying you better go for this.
Right.
You should very much go for this. Ravens did not. They punted. They gave the ball back to an alien Allen, a man that was doing godly things, kind of like Lamar. He marched them down the field, kicks a field goal. You just have to wonder, the fans in that stadium, others, right, their thought process of risk in that scenario. Because again, the quote, not risky thing to do is punt there.
Right.
The risky thing is to go for it. That's the conventional wisdom. Analytics tells us that actually that maybe isn't the case, right? So we're brought right back to the same challenge. How do we evaluate risk? That game was wild, and it gave us that classic fourth down decision.
Yeah. Well, let me reframe the issue here, just to kind of put it in this exact perspective as it pertains to this punt decision. We're told our entire life that procrastinating is very bad, that you should get your work done early. Basically, what that fourth down decision was you should figure out if you're going to win this game as early as possible. If you go for it now and you get it, you know you're winning the game. If you punt, you're kind of putting off any decisions you have to make down the line to figure out if you're going to win that game. So I think if we would reframe it as procrastinating, you knowing what is going on, then it kind of changes the way we look at this. Because let's say they don't get it and they're around midfield, and typically we see teams operate a little better in the midfield regions just because they have more space to work with. We see people get jammed up coming out of their own 20 and going in to their red zone. What's the functional difference between where the Bills really got the ball, given how much Josh Allen was cooking, and where they actually got it at the time? It's really not that big of a difference.
With the way they would have managed the clock and everything, probably not that big a difference.
100%. But it is a big difference to know you're going to win the game on 4th and 2 if you get it. And I think that's the way we should kind of look at this, rather than, oh, we're going to live to fight another day. We're going to give our defense a chance, or we're going to set our defense up better. I think that the difference is there's a lack of realization of you're not really doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a tough break too, for Ravens fans out there. It seemed like you're running away with this wonderful, wonderful win to start. But again, met with that ever-challenging question of what is risk. And we know that Harbaugh, in this case, decides to punt. There was a lot of scrutiny, too, on his late-game success, which I know Ben Baldwin and others looked into. And I think if you extrapolate it out further and further, it looks like he's pretty much average in late games. It doesn't seem like he's really bad in any way, even though there's a pretty heavy recency bias. It's just that they're ahead a lot. And because they're ahead of a lot, they're going to blow more games than a team that's not ahead a lot, right?
It's absolutely fascinating. We've talked about expected models so much. And the issue with expected models is we never really get to the level of sample where expectation or average comes in. With obviously a few very long-term players, such as Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is probably going to have rush yards over expected. That is really good because he is better than expected. But when you're looking at NFL games where there's only 32 teams and it's the best of the best of the best competing each other, there's not a massive difference between an 11-win team and an 8-win team, or in 1 year, a 13-win team could just be more healthy than a 7-win team.
Well, I mean, working with Tom Bliss in the NFL analytics department, we looked at luck. There were teams that had 2 games of luck. They won 2 more games. The Vikings flip-flopped. They went from losing 2 more to winning 2 more within 1 season. That was just 4 plays that he had isolated for luck. 2-game difference in a season just on that. And we didn't include refereeing because, well, Tom's with the NFL. He's probably not going to have refereeing in the model. That doesn't look good for him.
Right. Yeah, 100%. So when it turns out that you are hitting an 80% expectation win rate 75 times in your career, it's probably going to regress
He's a bad
to
coach,
an
man.
80% win rate.
He's a terrible coach. Yeah. No, this is all on him. He can't close. He can't finish. Lamar's never going to win what? No.
Well, and moreover, Michael, like you got to consider the teams who get to an 80% win rate are really good teams.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we're not even like we're talking about selection bias here. We're not even we are selecting for the really good teams. We're selecting for the Ravens and the Chiefs and these other teams. So congratulations. You are an average team who always is really far ahead. Like every person in the National Football League would want to be one of those teams.
Right. It's ridiculous.
Or one of those coaches, moreover.
It's ridiculous. Let's bounce around the league. Let's talk about a guy that had a great start in a new city, Aaron Rodgers.
This was another one of the games where I wanted to learn something. In this case, I didn't know what was going to go on. And it ties back to our discussion of risk, in particular with play action. But this one is with injury itself. Aaron Rodgers tears his Achilles. We saw him all last year be pretty hesitant to get hit. And most importantly, we saw him rarely get under center. And we saw him very rarely run under center play action. That's not the guy that Arthur Smith, the offense coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is. He likes to get under center and run play action very, very heavily. He likes to take those risks. So I went back and looked at Arthur Smith's entire career as a true play caller with the Titans, the Falcons, and the Steelers. And I wanted to understand if he was always locked into being that guy. And he was actually pretty flexible. You look at his time with the Falcons when he didn't necessarily have the Derrick Henry that he had with the Titans, and he didn't really have an excellent quarterback. And they were sub-average in terms of their under center play action rate. He wasn't asking his guys to turn the back to the defense and hold the ball for a little while longer. However, you look at that once he gets back to the Steelers, and it goes back to that Titans rate. So I was very interested of whether Arthur Smith was going to be flexible with Aaron Rodgers and let him run his pre-snap, quick throw, low average depth of target offense that he ran with the Jets, which they went through multiple offense coordinators, but the only consistent was Aaron Rodgers. So we'll call it the Aaron Rodgers offense. And that was not what happened at all. We saw him turn his back to the defense, get hit quite a bit with a high sack rate, and end up getting a victory. Now, what did that mean long-term? I don't really know. The offense ended up being average in terms of efficiency. And so I think we're going to have to wait 2 or 3 more weeks to figure out really who will win this battle. But it's clear who won the first week, and that's Arthur Smith and riskier play.
Yeah. I think what everybody's looking at is the 4 touchdowns in the win. And you want to jump very quickly to he's back. We got our quarterback in Pittsburgh. Finally, thank God we have someone that can go win a football game for us. Let's put aside the fact that we're playing the Jets. Let's put aside for a quick second that Aaron Rodgers has only played 1 game and he's a rickety old QB that we'll see what happens. You mentioned it's a little bit riskier on the injury side of things if you're running play action. Is that something that you pulled?
Well, it's not necessarily a data thing. It's just more of a player thing. You know?
I mean, it makes sense on its surface, right?
Right.
That it would be riskier to turn your back and open yourself up to these men to just, yeah.
And moreover, you're holding the ball substantially longer. Like it takes longer to run a play action pass. And the hope is that is offset by the bite distance of the linebackers and by the safeties freaking out because they're playing the run and all of a sudden they got to run 10, 15 yards to play the pass. Injury data is always a little fluky because you think about it, there's 1 or 2 injuries a game. You don't really know exactly what's going on. People try to keep that kind of hush-hush throughout the week. But just kind of fundamentally playing the game, that is a fear amongst quarterbacks. And I think that's why we didn't see Aaron Rodgers do that a lot last year with the Jets.
What about Daniel Jones? This is one where you look at him and you say, okay, how much of this is Daniel Jones? How much of this is the New York Giants trying to untangle this whole scenario? Um, Curious what your thoughts were on him.
This was a very interesting one because we mentioned how it looked great for Aaron Rodgers in terms of touchdowns. It didn't really look great in terms of the expected, in terms of the advanced analytics. This was one where everything looked good. And it really calls into question, number one, can this possibly continue? We saw Tyler Warren be really good. We know that the Colts had a pretty good offensive line last year. So maybe it's just a better scenario. Maybe Kevin O'Connell in the few weeks fixed him just like he fixed Sam Darnold when he was on the practice squad of the Minnesota Vikings. But I really want to continue to see how he can pass the ball deep. That is something that Shane Steichen has asked Joe Flacco to do. That is something that he has asked Anthony Richardson to do. And we saw Daniel Jones able to be pretty successful at that last week. But that's not what his game was with the Giants. And I think perhaps if we see that regress back to what we've seen, things could be a little trickier. Another thing I want to highlight is not a lot of pressure was being had on him. Last year, Chop Robinson, who came out of Penn State, he was a rookie edge rusher for the Miami Dolphins. He was one of our best players in our frame-by-frame pass rushing grade, which basically looks at where the player is aligned because it kind of changes when a player is aligned a certain way on a certain down, and looked at the outcome of how they could do pressure on every 10th of a second. And he was one of the best players in the league. He's one of the worst players last week. I wonder if it wasn't a little bit more fluky, but the advanced analytics, which tend to be pretty sticky for us at the play and team level for quarterbacks, did indicate that we saw something special from a Daniel Jones week one.
Yeah, and going back to his previous web, the New York Giants, a new quarterback there, kind of the opposite. Russell Wilson really struggled, really struggled. And I don't know, again, you start to wonder how much of Daniel Jones' challenges were Daniel Jones versus the Giants. Now, from what I understand, he just doesn't take any shots downfield. Daniel Jones really didn't go downfield much when he was with the Giants, right?
He didn't, and moreover, he was very unable to complete them. I mean, how many times last year did we see Malik Neighbors open 25 yards down the field with his hands in the air? Like, come on, man, and it's a little short. Now, that could have been injury. As with football goes, there's so many things to consider, but we've really never seen him do it. And I think that's why they wanted to go to Russell Wilson, who we talked about, that kind of play action, drop back and sling it, Arthur Smith style of football. Russell Wilson manned that fairly well, especially in the early part of the season last year. We didn't see it happen this year for the Giants, or at least this week for the Giants.
Yeah. Some other quarterbacks that struggled, Cam Ward, Bryce Young. Ward didn't really get much help from his receivers. Notably, the drops did not help him. But Bryce Young made a couple decisions there where you're kind of like, okay, part of me is starting to lose hope. Some really bad decisions. The pick six, but again, he's with the Panthers, so they're kind of this wild card of sorts where it's like, okay, wait a second. Darnold, Baker were making horrible decisions when they were there too, so how much of this is Carolina just somehow leaching into this man's mind to where he's not making the best decisions, and how much of this just Bryce Young?
Right, so I'll start with Cam Ward. I think he performed up to expectation, if not slightly above, just because of the way it looked. He looked confident, but he ended up being 25th in our passing Sumer score, and that's about what you can expect from a first-round quarterback. So I'm interested to see if he can overperform that, but I think it was a pretty expected game from Cam Ward. I didn't expect this game from Bryce Young. Early part of last season, maybe I would have expected it. But as the season progressed, we saw him be able to eliminate that type of decision-making, Michael. We saw him be able to hit his receivers. And after, playing some pretty stout opponents in the middle of the year, the Eagles, the Chiefs in 2024, he really put together some excellent games as the season went on. And so I expected him to kind of continue that role in week one. We didn't see it despite Tedorow McMillan having an excellent game in terms of the advanced
He stood out for you
analytics.
guys.
He stood out for us in our Sumer scores, which does take kind of a player agnostic approach and compares everything to history. So perhaps if you drop a ball, we're not going to ping you as hard if you drop it if a lot of other people dropped it in history, for example, rather than just like slapping on a bad play for you. So there is a little nuance there. There was a big drop where he put one hand up and couldn't get the other hand up for whatever reason. He may have been interfered with down the field. It could have been a touchdown. Who knows? But he did really well. And the divergence of those two things, the addition of what was thought to be the missing piece for this Panthers team, a quality wide receiver one, and Bryce Young not being able to live up to it, called into question a lot of things that we saw last year. So I'm really interested to see how that's going to progress.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, another young quarterback that is in his sophomore season that people are worried, at least Broncos fans might be a little worried about having a sophomore slump, is Bo Nix. Famously having the RPO where he's handing off to no one like 16 times or whatever, right? That's where play action, the nuances of play action, like what is it? Sometimes it's Bo Nix play actioning to a ghost, and other times it's a true, good, traditional fake and carrying it out, right? But what did you guys see with Bo Nix?
I think the story on Bo Nix all last year was that he was able to bring the Broncos to a winning season, not by doing it all himself or even by being a particularly efficient quarterback. He was able to do it by avoiding negative plays, in particular sacks. This was not the week of that. We saw real regression in his ability to avoid sacks and in particular to protect the ball. We saw quite a few turnovers or turnover-worthy plays from him. And if that's going to be the case, it's really going to call into question what an excellently constructed roster from the Broncos can do this season. They virtually have all pros or all pro level players at every defensive position group, defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker, safety, cornerback. They have excellent players at all those, but all of it will be for Nye if we see Bo Nix to continue doing something we haven't really seen him do, and that is bring on negative plays to the offense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was, again, just some really tough decisions there. But the Broncos were able to pull it off, maybe partially, probably largely because of who they were playing. Did you watch the full game last night?
I did. What a fascinating.
I left to go get ice cream. I was treating myself some ice cream, and I came back and I said, wait a second, what? And so I missed the comeback, I guess the go-ahead that J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings engineered there.
So I think the thing that I really honed in on was Caleb Williams starts the game off 10 for 10. They're moving the ball down the field. And we talked a little bit about the Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford trade, where Jared Goff was just unable to figure out what was happening after the snap. Sean McVay was having him turn his back to the defense quite a bit, and he couldn't figure it out. They were one of the worst expected points added total teams the year before they traded him for Matthew Stafford, who was one of the best expected points added total teams when running under center play action. But then all of a sudden he goes to Ben Johnson, and he becomes literally one of the best in the league at this. It ends up being a complete win-win for both sides. They basically traded for a year of Matthew Stafford, who is still an excellent quarterback, mind you. They basically traded for that development year for Jared Goff. And all of a sudden the Lions end up as one of the better teams in the league. So I wanted to see if Ben Johnson could do that for Caleb Williams as well. That 10 for 10 start did not include any of that. It included a lot of improvisation from Caleb. And so I wasn't really shocked when Brian Flores was able to get his defense together and really start disrupting Caleb Williams. It's also very interesting because Ben Johnson's right hand, Tanner Engstrand, who is now with the Jets, was able to get that level of middle of the field play action play from the guy who was prior to Caleb Williams, Justin Fields. I think that's going to be the real question for the former number one pick. Can you complete middle of the field play action passes? If you can, this is going to be a good offense. If he cannot, this is going to be a struggle for him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the Lions just completely reversed, at least Goff did, because he struggled in Los Angeles with play action.
Right.
That was part of what went into that trade, and what you shared with me is the fact that, he really struggled turning his back on play action. He goes to Detroit. Within 1 year, they're running play action all the time.
Right.
Highly effective, right?
Mhm.
And so you just wonder if that can happen for a guy like Caleb Williams that also didn't really do it a lot. He didn't really run a lot of play action. He's not Jared Goff, though. He's not 6'6", right?
Right. Right.
So
100%. And so, like, this is where the weird kind of physical parts of the game come in. We've seen Drew Brees, who was probably shorter than Caleb Williams, be able to complete these passes. We've seen Russell Wilson be able to sling the ball deep in a play action heavy offense with the Seahawks and lead a team to a Super Bowl. So I think it's just about getting on the same page as the offense coordinator, knowing what to look for, and really executing. I think it's going to be the key for them.
yeah. Now, Parsons got a lot of pub. Big trade, massive trade. And in his first game with the Packers, he got a sack there. Was that really that meaningful of a sack? Not all sacks are created equal. I think Brett Coleman said that once. They really aren't, though. And he got 3 pressures, though. It seemed like he was still very disruptive. And I did watch that full Eagles game. Jalen Hurts was just running around. I mean, they didn't need to pass the ball because Jalen Hurts just would drop back and say, okay, I guess I'll take another 5 to 10 yards on another rush, just kind of running around there. And you just had to wonder, if Micah Parsons is in that game, is he able to do that?
I think there's kind of 2 ways to look at this. The first is, can Micah Parsons make sacks that other people can't? And the answer is probably yes. In fact, the sack that you mentioned, we only had about 3 or 4 seconds into the play where Jared Goff starts rolling out. We thought that Goff was going to go ahead and make a target, that he was going to throw the ball. And so it calls into question a little bit whether it was more Goff's fault or whether it was Parsons being in
That's where sacks can be so variable, right?
Yeah, speed guy. But even at the point where he's tracking him down, that's still a really, really difficult to play to make. So yes, Micah Parsons makes sacks that others cannot.
Did you get to see what he ran, like how fast he was running on that?
Yeah, he was running like between 18 and 19 miles per hour. Like, we're talking about like a running back coming after him. I think one of the highest ones was like Derrick Henry and a couple other tailbacks hitting like 22 miles per hour, which is absolutely nuts. Micah Parsons is like substantially larger than all those guys and is just hunting like a cheetah. It was beautiful to watch. But he's a defense all on himself. But at the same time, when you have good pass rushers, that's a pretty sticky stat. And so, like, Oso Odigizua, for example, he's probably going to continue to be a good pass rusher, especially in the interior for that Cowboys defense. The question that at least Jerry brought up was the run defense and what impact it's going to have on the Cowboys' run defense. Didn't look great against Saquon and definitely didn't look great against Jalen Hurts. Would that have looked different with Micah? Did it look different for the Packers? It's tough to tell. Micah only got like 7 snaps in true run situations. So I think we're going to have to wait a couple more weeks to figure that out. But I certainly would prefer to have Micah Parsons. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you guys have mentioned, in the previous video, getting help with the entanglement numbers and looking at edge rushers, defensive linemen, I mean, they're one of the least entangled positions. So
Right.
when you have a guy like Parsons, who I believe led the league in pressure rate over the last 4 years,
That's correct.
maybe every year, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know it was for sure over that 4-year period, he was the highest average. That's someone where you can say, okay, hey, we put him over here. He kind of does the same thing on an island over here. He's probably going to have very, very similar results. And unbelievably good things happen when you pressure a quarterback. I mean, it just changes everything. The 3 pressures that he had, one was an interception, one was a 2-yard loss on a completion, and the other was his sack. So,
Right.
And I think some, depending on who's measuring it, they can be fairly liberal on what is a pressure.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you hear like, oh, they had 20 pressures in the game. And I've looked at NFL Fast Data and you're like, what were those pressures? And you go back and you look at the tape. It's like, that didn't really look like a pressure. Micah Parsons is pressure. He is constantly breathing down your neck. 6'3", 250 pounds, changing the entire dynamic of a game. I mean, if he goes out, you have to wonder, is there another defensive player that moves the line in a game more than him? I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if there's another defensive player that changes the game as much as Micah Parsons.
Yeah, and you really got to ask, moreover, if there's another non-quarterback who moves the line that much. I think really the only player who is in his stratosphere, that's the reason why they're the two highest paid non-quarterbacks in the league, is Myles Garrett. Because exactly that. You mentioned the entanglement. Like, a wide receiver is a sticky position, but it is massively entangled by the fact that a quarterback has to throw to a wide receiver. No one has to throw to an edge rusher. You just put him out there and tell him to go get the ball. As a result, it's really Myles Garrett and Michael Parsons as guys who can probably move the line, just a hair under 2 points in any given game, which is like an absolutely massive difference. That's basically what they give to home teams. Like a home team gets between a point
There's
and
your
two.
home field advantage, Micah Parsons.
Exactly.
Well, apparently Garrett wasn't enough. I think they held the Bengals, what was it, to like 2 net yards or something like that in the second half, of some crazy stat, and they still lost. But yeah, Garrett is he's just Joe Burrow's nightmare. And
He's really everybody's nightmare.
yeah. But he just continues to be just such a force. But yeah, I mean, defensive ends, they're just a different type of athlete too. You see those guys on a basketball court, Micah Parsons in that celebrity game, the dunks that he could do, and you're just like, what? That guy is a defensive lineman. Myles Garrett, the dunks that this guy can do. It's not just that they're strong as hell. They are explosive athletes that could probably play a lot of different sports, but football makes the most sense because they get to just be animals. They get to be crazy defensive players that can just go chase down prey all day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, as a fan, fun to watch.
100%. A funny story that I like to tell is we were on Radio Row for the Super Bowl, and Myles Garrett at the time had requested a trade, and he wasn't expected to be on Radio Row. And then all of a sudden the whispers started to come. Myles Garrett is probably going to make appearances on a lot of these shows. And then all of a sudden it was like a mountain moving throughout Radio Row. And it was like you couldn't see all the reporters, but you could just see 6'5", 285-pound Myles Garrett just like moving the entire world. It was impeccable.
Like how many people have ever been built like that? I had that same impression the very first time that I saw LeBron at an AAU game. And he's tall, but then you see him in person, you're like, okay, he's a legit 6'9" without shoes. I think without shoes, he looks like someone that's probably 6'9". So in shoes, he's walking around at like 6'10" and a half. And you watch this guy bring the ball up. And so, yeah, there's just certain players, you see him out of the game and you're like, what? Like that guy's a professional athlete. And you marvel at that, but you can't obviously ignore the fact that you're going to marvel at players that are just true physical specimen, like a Myles Garrett, right? Like a Micah Parsons. I think he was the celebrity game MVP, if I remember right. Like he had like 30 someplace, shot every time. Not the best jumper, but he's going to be trouble in the paint.
Right. My favorite thing about this is I was an all-state outside linebacker, edge rusher in high school. I played Division I college football at the linebacker position, and Steph Curry is my size.
Yeah.
Like that, Marcus Smart is my size. Like these guys in basketball, it's just completely different. And with guys like Micah Parsons and Miles Turner, Miles Turner obviously as well, but Myles Garrett, it's a completely different thing because you're adding on speed and power and agility in a way that probably you'll never see packaged that way before.
Yeah. Now, with the quarterbacks, is there anything stat-wise that we can look at to untangle their performance a little bit, right? So like Next Gen Stats has passing rate or passing completion percentage above expected so it's CPOE. And you see that flirted sometimes on Twitter. If you go into their Next Gen Stats website, you can find it. And, I'm curious about untangling the quarterback performance and how helpful a statistic is like that. I'd love to hear your thoughts first. I actually reached out to Amazon, a guy, Sam,
Yeah.
that works there. You've probably met him, Sam Schwartzstein.
Yeah, he's the man.
Yeah, yeah, he's awesome. He always responds super quick to me. Um, but I'm curious what you think of untangling a quarterback and using that in any way. Like, how much merit is there to completion percentage over expected?
There's merit to it descriptively, certainly, because practically what you're doing is looking at what the quarterback was intending to do and what actually happened. And I think with a guy like Geno Smith, we've been able to a lot more accurately put a thumb on why he is a good player in a way that we couldn't 5, 10 years ago. And that's because he completes a lot of very difficult passes. You look at the year-to-year stability, it's not great. It's about 50 out of 100. So it's better than most stats, but it's not ideal. And it does take a little while to stabilize because it is taking in so much context about when a player throws the ball, where a player throws the ball, stuff like that. But I think it's a big bump in descriptiveness over just the regular completion percentage because it does take steps to disentangle the player. Unfortunately, you're not disentangling the player from the wide receiver, even though you may be disentangling him from, the decision that he made or something like that. I think the real only way we can disentangle a quarterback right now is based on the decisions he makes. And I think that is best exemplified through how many times he gets sacked, how many times he scrambles, how many times he decides to throw the ball away. And I think all of those being fairly sticky stats give us a good clue into what the offensive coordinator is intimately involved with versus not. I think the true disentangled quarterback stats are scramble rate, sack rate, throwaway rate, how many times you get an attempt off, pressure to sack rate. And while those year to year are pretty sticky, they may not be the most sticky of all time. They also stick generally when players change teams. And so I think that's really the profile that we want to build for a quarterback. And then everything else comes from the relationship with the offensive line, the wide receivers, the running back, and the offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it's such a tough position to untangle. A lot of times you're relying on the priors, and you're so heavily reliant on the priors that you almost struggle to have any model of merit in any way when
Right.
you're evaluating the quarterback because it's just all based on what's happened. And so you're trying to figure out, okay, what would happen over here in this new environment if you went to another team or in this next game. It's very challenging. Some of the things that Sam mentioned to me, Sam Schwartzstein of Amazon with NextJet Stats, it doesn't take into account wide receiver body position. So if a guy's laying like an inch off the ground
Yep.
and he's spread out, it's not going to account for that. It's not going to account for drops. So if a pass is very easy and it's dropped, the QB is going to get nicked for that, even though it's kind of on the wide receiver. So it's definitely not a perfect measurement. And with the tracking, player tracking is wonderful. We're still trying to figure out what to do with all that. You guys are kind of at the forefront of that in many ways, but it's still just XY coordinates from my understanding. This is not Hawkeye where we have all this biomechanical information like a baseball game and we can just figure out, okay, this is what the pitcher is doing each time. This is how he's creating that spin rate. This is how the hitter is, generating this launch. We don't have that kind of data in football, right?
That's correct. And moreover, it's really difficult to gather that data. Sam Schwartzstein, who was with the XFL, who has not only innovated in the kickoff, but innovated in the tech that was implemented in football, knows this better than anyone. He's discussed at length why the spot of the ball can never really be automated, even though they have implemented Hawkeye to do the measurement, which I'm pretty sure Sam at one point said that he just thought they should move the ball to the next yard line and no one would even notice. So you would literally never have to measure it. And you couldn't even tell. But as a result, it's really hard to actually spot the ball because you got to figure out when someone's shin properly hit the ground or when this player laid at a certain angle on this player. And so I think it's really hard to measure those joints, which if we're talking about offensive defensive line play, could make a world of difference to tell us which offensive linemen, defensive linemen are really good, because there's a lot of nuance in the technique there, particularly as it pertains to, guards and tackles on the offensive line. But we won't be able to get a great idea of these ultra detailed items until we are able to are able to track, the fingers, the wrist, the elbow, and et cetera, especially when it comes to wide receivers and completion percentage over expected. But at the same time, like, it calls into question when you're having someone stick their arms out and 4 people legitimately try to chop them off or hit them or knock them down. Like, how much of that can a wide receiver really control? And so I think we do have a pretty good view in history of like what should happen. We could just get a little closer, particularly with quarterbacks, as it pertains to accuracy, like hitting the target, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, still just a mystery box of sorts, but it's so fun to watch these quarterbacks in new environments. And I think that's just so special to football, the continual surprise. Like, you just can't predict that Daniel Jones not only is going to win the starting spot, but is going to look like a completely different human in his first game. You cannot predict that. Aaron Rodgers is going to go out there, throw 4 touchdowns, and lead the Steelers and look every part of the quarterback that, they had been wanting. It's just a special part of football. And yeah, it's fun to watch. Obviously, week 1 is especially exciting, but really appreciate, you coming on here and obviously just sharing the information over the past few weeks. For those of you who don't know, the entanglement video that I did a few weeks ago, I was texting Sumer back and forth all the time. A lot of times I was texting Sam here. Sam, again, I felt like that Lord of the Rings piece where I'm just reaching out to Sam and just asking for these precious details. Yeah, really appreciate you coming on here. This was fun, man.
No, my pleasure. It's always fun to talk data, especially when it's building this bigger narrative and seeking to answer questions. Because I think we all love football, but it's really difficult to understand. I mean, I've been in it since I was in 2nd grade, and I still struggle to understand most of it. And so any way to peel back the onion, I'm excited to do.
Sweet, man. We'll have to do it again.
Yes, sir.
All righty.